Greetings, AEE participants. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today for this virtual conversation, even if I can't see you. I'm Steve Smith from Experiential Consulting, and we're going to be talking about learning from near misses today. So we'll start with a quote from my colleague Sarah, who states, "The world of snow and avalanches is a wicked learning environment, and we don't get feedback every time we go out." And I would extrapolate from Sarah's wise words and just add that the world of experiential education can also be an environment in which we don't always get feedback every time we go out. So let's let that quote set the tone for the remainder of our discussion today about how we can tune into and learn from near misses. So we'll start by defining some terms. And before we do, think about a time when you may have had a near miss, or perhaps you thought of it as a close call in some sort of outdoor or experiential learning context. Did you and the people you were with reflect on that afterwards? Did you share it with anyone else? And did you have any anxiety about sharing it? If so, please go ahead and pause the recording and take a couple minutes to reflect on this question. And when you're ready, come back. Okay, welcome back. I hope that was an interesting way for you to reflect to get us started today. And now we're going to define some terms. What a near miss is and what it isn't. A near miss is literally a miss. It's not a hit. So relevant near misses should stand out from normal, and normal, of course, varies from person to person or from program to program. So we're specifically talking about near misses today, things that almost happened but didn't actually happen. Let's take OSHA's definition of a near miss, which I find to be pretty useful. OSHA thinks of a near miss as an occurrence in which no one was harmed, but in which injury could easily have occurred if there was a light difference in timing or location. So imagine, for example, a tree falling right next to a group of participants in a tent. That would be a near miss. If the tree fell on the tent, that would not be a near miss, right? That would be a hit. OSHA also refers to near misses as close calls, near collisions, and in some cases, a near miss can be an accident precursor, as we see in this cartoon here, where this person is ignoring the near miss or not being curious about what's causing it to his peril in this example. It's also a really widely misused term. I see things like this all the time. I fell 40 feet into a crevasse and I broke my leg, but I was rescued. I was very fortunate to survive this near miss. And I would say, my friends, that this was not a near miss. This was an incident, right? Just because you survived doesn't mean that it was a near miss. At the same time, another area where there can be confusion is just because it was a miss doesn't mean that it didn't cause some kind of emotional trauma. So even a physical near miss can still be an emotional hit and can require some kind of follow-up care or assessment of the impact of the near miss experience. This is something that we call near miss trauma. So here's an example of someone, still having some emotional impact from the physical near miss. I also find it really useful to make a useful distinction between an incident, a near miss, and just business as usual. What's normal in your program or in your environment? So you could make a quiz like this and use that as a way to calibrate and train your staff or participants about what a near miss is and what it isn't. So take a look at these examples and think about your program. A rattlesnake rattles at a student from 3 feet away. Is that an incident? Is that a near miss, or is that just normal in your program? I guess it might depend on what part of the country or the world you're calling in from. How about 6 feet away? How about 1 feet away? At what point does that shift from normal to more of a reportable near miss, where there might be some learning associated with it, something you want to do differently, something that has some voltage to it or potential to learn? Similarly, pulling down a bear bag, pulling down a tree while hanging a bear bag with no injuries, would that be an incident? Would that be a near miss, or would that just be normal in your program? Student with anaphylactic peanut allergy almost eats a peanut butter cookie, but is an instructor swoops in and intervenes right before that happens. Would that be a near miss, or would that just be normal or an incident in your program? So you can see the list of examples here. And I would encourage you, if you're interested in near miss reporting, that it is very important to help people understand where near miss ends and where normal begins. And having something like this that you can use to calibrate the way people think about it is a good way to do that. And feel free to use these examples or make up your own. So let's talk a little bit about the underlying human psychology that's associated with learning from near misses. And I would suggest that near misses, broadly speaking, are underreported. I have never seen an organization that over reports its near misses, where we hear about all of the near misses that are happening in the field. And I think that there are some easily recognized and common reasons why they are underreported. So I'm going to again ask you to pause the video and think about coming up with your own list of reasons. Try to come up with 5 reasons why you think near misses might be underreported in your program. Even if you're reporting them, could you still be underreporting them? And try to come up with 5 reasons for that. Go ahead and pause the video and come back when you are ready. Okay, welcome back. I hope that was a useful exercise for you, and I hope you came up with at least 5 reasons why you think near misses may be underreported in your program. Let me share with you some of the reasons that we have commonly seen. One, it is human nature to want to avoid discomfort, and it can be uncomfortable to speak up and share that you had a near miss, especially if it was a near miss that held a lot of potential for a more serious incident, or if it was an embarrassing thing that you did, or something that you're concerned that this might reflect badly on you and your leadership. And so unless your organization has really intentionally put some things in place and some systems and some culture and some role modeling to counteract that, then I would suggest as a starting place that many people, that's where they begin. And it's human nature just to want to avoid the discomfort of speaking up about that. Another one can be some kind of perceived hierarchy in the partnership. If you're working with someone else and you have a near miss, or maybe they have a near miss, there can be some hierarchy or some pressure at times that may make it harder for you or for them to speak up and report that near miss. Again, unless your organization has really intentionally done some things to sort of break down those hierarchies and make near miss reporting more normalized. There may be no clear process for reporting a near miss. You may not have that box on your form, or if you do, it may be such a laborious process, a time-consuming process of reporting the near miss, that why would you take the time to do it? And I have definitely seen, the barrier that convoluted incident and near miss reporting systems can lead people with limited time not to choose to use that time to fill out a report about something that actually didn't happen. You could have this relates a little bit to the first one, but you could have some sort of anxiety about what happens to me if I report this near miss. Who's going to read it, and what are they going to do with this information? You may not see any benefit to reporting it. Maybe you've reported them in the past and nothing has happened, or there's been no follow-up, or you didn't see anything meaningfully change. And so why would you do it again? And finally, there could be specific consequences that you're concerned about. Maybe you've seen someone else get blamed or in some way punished for reporting things in the past. Perhaps you're concerned if I report this, maybe they won't let me lead this particular program or do this particular activity, or maybe they'll try to, limit the ways in which we've traditionally done this activity. So I'm just going to fly under the radar and keep this near miss to myself. And these are all really common. These are common factors that contribute to that lack of near miss reporting. Here's a cautionary tale I'll share, which comes to us from Powder magazine. And it's an avalanche specific example. A skier triggered an avalanche on a low hazard day, and he felt a responsibility to share the lessons learned from that event because it was technically a low hazard day and an avalanche occurred anyway. So he wanted to submit a report. He wasn't injured. There was no fatalities or injuries or burials, but there was still an avalanche that he had triggered. So he wanted to share the lessons learned. And after he submitted it, he stated, I had the strange sense of making myself vulnerable to the judgments of others. I had that all too familiar twist in my gut when I second guess my posts on social media. The way people perceive misconduct in the backcountry can lead to a hushed atmosphere. And I think it's really notable that he uses the term misconduct here. What was the misconduct? It was a low hazard day. He's fulfilling his responsibilities by sharing his experience. He's trying to make it safer for others. He's sharing his lessons learned. And it's really notable that he feels this sense of being judged and that he has somehow had some type of misconduct. And he's talking about how that can collectively create this cycle of blame and silence where we don't learn from each other. And he continues, I wondered if I'd be ridiculed for not knowing exact specifics or for getting my terminology wrong. Maybe my line wasn't rad enough. Maybe I was exposing a secret by including the names of the access and route lines. Maybe I was simply overreacting, the same way Elise Sogstad had thought twice about pulling her airbag at Tunnel Creek for fear of being teased and being frightened by what she at first considered a small slough. That, of course, was a multi-fatality incident here in my home state of Washington State, where some folks skiing in a large group of experts had differing ideas about their risk tolerance and their group dynamics and their communication and their leadership. And this person felt ashamed at first that she had pulled her airbag. And in fact, it saved her life. And other people perished in that multi-fatality incident. So if you'd like to read that article and the context for where these quotes come from, it's in Powder magazine. It's called Getting Beyond the Emotional Game of Reporting an Avalanche. All of this to sort of paint the picture of the psychological challenges and the organizational culture and the group dynamics and the larger collective industry in which we operate that can make it hard for people to speak up when they have experienced an incident or even a near miss, even something where nothing occurred that can still induce anxiety to report it. So just acknowledging that as sort of our starting place. And if your organization has done some work to meaningfully turn that around and to make a safe space for people to report incidents and near misses, and to do so without immediately being shamed and blamed and judged, then I think that you should be commended for that. And that's an important bit of work that you've done to undo this prevailing norm where it's quite normally challenging for people. So when we report near misses, we are harvesting information that otherwise would go unexamined. It would be a hidden place for them. I like to think of near misses as lottery tickets that we've already paid for, and we may as well cash them in and harvest the benefits that we can get from them. We can help others learn from our own experiences. We don't all have to repeat the same mistakes or encounter the same types of incidents or near misses to learn from them. For example, I was featured on the Sharp End podcast some years ago, sharing the story of my own brush with death on Asgard Pass, where I glissaded into this hidden hazard in the snow and was trapped underneath the snow for a long period of time in a waterfall and almost drowned and almost died of hypothermia. And it was just quite a story. If you'd like to read it or hear about it, you can check out the Sharp End podcast, episode 25. But the point is, as a result of sharing my story, the Forest Service went ahead and now has a very informative sign at the trailhead warning people about exactly where that waterfall hole is and recommended ways of managing your risk when you're traveling up and down Asgard Pass, which has unfortunately been the site of some tragedies over the years where others fell into the same hole that I fell into and did not survive. Those of you who were at AEE a few years ago saw me give a Activate AEE talk about my experience on Asgard Pass, and it was as challenging as the experience was. I'm glad that my willingness to share it created opportunity for learning for others. So let's talk a little bit more about the theory of how incidents occur. And this is worth spending a few minutes on because how you think about incident causation fundamentally affects your ability to analyze and learn from them afterwards. So I'm going to present about 100 years of incident causation theory in just a few minutes here in a very basic way. And the underlying concept behind this, as you can see in the quote at the bottom here, is that you can learn or you can blame. And you need to take your pick, which one of those two things that you want to do. So we're going to start with a linear model. And this goes all the way back to the 1920s and an author by the name of Heinrich, who came up with several things that fundamentally affected the way that we still continue to think about occupational safety management today. And one of the real biggest influences that Heinrich came up with was the simple, what he called the domino model of accident or incident causation. And his theory was quite simple, which is that one thing leads to the next, leads to the next, leads to the next, and that is where the injury takes place. So if you believe in this linear view of incident causation, then your job as a risk manager is to do what you see in the bottom image here, which is to intervene and to interrupt that linear flow of events so that the injury doesn't take place. Heinrich's model is inherently, there's a look at, the responsibility of the risk manager is to intervene, to come out of nowhere, swoop in and stop that linear transaction of events. And it is a very simple mechanistic way of viewing accidents or incidents. And it's based on the idea that incidents happen in these linear and predictable ways, and we just need to predict and respond effectively in order to keep them from happening. It's a very convenient way of looking at incidents, and it tends to blame the people who were closest to the incident itself. It puts them in a position where they're more likely to be held responsible for whatever occurred. If only they had worn their helmet, if only they had done this or not done that, then the incident would have been prevented. It's that kind of thinking. Zooming ahead to the 1980s, James Reason came up with this more complicated model, the Swiss cheese model of incident causation. And in Reason's model, there are layers of Swiss cheese that represent different layers of defense. Things like your training, your procedures, your supervision, your equipment that you use. And the holes in the Swiss cheese represent failures of some sort, either active ones that people are actively committing or latent conditions in the workplace that are leading to weaknesses in those layers of Swiss cheese. So that a hazard represented by the little red ball on the right side could potentially pass through all of those holes in the layers of Swiss cheese if those layers align in the right way to allow the hazard to pass through, causing an injury. So this is invites us to get a little bit further away from the injury and look at that bigger picture of things upstream of the incident, like who did they hire? How did they train them? What was the equipment that was provided? What were the procedures and the policies that the organization had in place? So it invites us to look a little bit more upstream of the incident, but you'll notice that like the dominoes, it actually is still quite a linear model. And it shows this hazard moving through the layers of Swiss cheese in this linear and somewhat predictable way. The implication of the Swiss cheese model is that we need more layers of Swiss cheese. That in order to keep the hazard from getting to cause an injury, the more layers we have, the more likely it is that that hazard would not be able to penetrate all the way through. More training, more equipment, more procedures, more supervision, and that is what will keep us safe. So that's the sort of underlying takeaway from this model of incident causation. And finally, it brings us up to the current day. And there isn't a single author that I would ascribe this to like I would Heinrich or James Reason. But the idea behind systems thinking is that incidents are not linear and they can't be prevented by linear thinking. So instead of the Swiss cheese neatly lined up in this linear way, imagine different hazards bouncing around the different layers of defense and in fact being created by the different layers of defense so that there is complexity taking place in this that is much more representative of the three-dimensional world and the complex systems that we operate in our organizations. So when a near miss occurs, you might think about that as a weak signal that we can tune into and learn from that and understand the complexity of what's happening in the somewhat inconvenient and uncomfortable diagram that you see here. It also kind of helps remind us, though, that we don't need to wait for some tragedy to occur to learn. We can try to tune into this, listen to those weak signals, understand the complexity of what's happening, and we can learn every day. We continuously improve. Sidney Dekker likes to say that death does not arise from some sudden single point of failure. It hides in our success. And there could be perhaps no better example of that than the Deepwater Horizon oil rig that spectacularly exploded in the Gulf of Mexico. Days after they had been awarded a national safety award for 7 years of zero incidents. Do you really think that they had zero incidents happening in those 7 years? Or did they have the kind of workplace and organizational culture that was suppressing people's concerns, leading to things not being reported, leading to not even incidents, but certainly not near misses being harvested for opportunities to learn and improve? And as a result, this tragedy occurred, not only injuring many people and killing others, but causing a tremendous ecological damage to the Gulf of Mexico that continues to this day. So again, from Sidney Dekker, you can blame or you can learn. Take your pick. So as we look at these models and we start with the linear, back in 100 years ago and down to systems thinking in the current day, towards the top, if you're looking over at the left side of the screen, towards the top here, the linear approaches invite a more simple story. The systems thinking invites a more complex story. The linear models tend to drive us towards a simple story of blaming humans, blaming individuals. And down at the bottom, we're more interested in learning than in blaming, understanding the complexity. The simpler the model, the more it leads us to want to find the problem, hunt down the problem, and fix it, like we were working on a lawnmower and fixing a broken flywheel, as opposed to understanding, even if we can't yield a quick fix. Ultimately, the question of reporting incidents, I believe that the more linear and simplistic our thinking, the more it suppresses incident reporting. And the more complex our thinking, the more it may make room for people to speak up and share their concerns and try to understand the weak signals and the lessons that we're learning every day instead of waiting for some tragedy to occur in order to learn. So again, with Sydney's great quote. So thank you for bearing with me through that somewhat academic, but to me, fascinating look into how different incident causation theories and models can affect the culture and can affect the mindset we have about learning from incidents and near misses, and even our ability to report them to begin with. So why have I set up my screen here as this iceberg? And I hope you can see that this is supposed to be an iceberg with some of it above the sea level and some of it below. And it's a metaphor for what we see and what we can't see. So what we tend to see, what we normally hear about are dramatic events. We hear about the big events that occur. And what's below the surface that's harder to see, harder to hear, harder to tune into are the subtleties, the little daily events, the near misses that are occurring. They can function as blind spots for our organization if we don't find a way to unearth that and to harvest that information. So take a look at this bell curve and imagine that this bell curve represents all of your programming in a given year, for example. Some at the far left side some situations might result in unwanted outcomes, injuries, missing participants, illnesses, things that go wrong. Everything on the far right side is really positive surprises, serendipitous, really rare and exceptional events. And I would argue, as this bell curve shows, we don't really live in either of those places very often. For the most part, things go as planned. We meet our goals. The students come back in one piece, happily changed from their experience. And it's interesting that a traditional approach to safety management tends to study just that little corner down on the bottom left, tends to look at the things that has gone wrong and to try to make that part of the graph smaller. We're trying to have fewer and fewer and fewer things go wrong. And that's sort of a traditional top-down approach to safety management. It doesn't help us to understand the greater question of what about the 99% of the time, or whatever number it is in your organization, where things go right? Do we know why they go right? Why is success the rule and not the exception? And as you stare at this graph and you think about unwanted outcomes here and planned outcomes in the middle, where would you put near misses? Where do you think near misses would live on this bell curve? I would suggest they're probably somewhere over here. It's not exactly an unwanted outcome, but you can see it from there. And it certainly wasn't exactly your planned outcome. So if we think about, if all we're doing is tuning into the things that went really wrong, we're missing all these near misses, and we're also missing this larger question of understanding why things normally go right. So this is what we call the difference between safety 1 and safety 2 kind of thinking. Safety 1 is the red part, traditional safety, looking at what has gone wrong. Safety 2 is going to invite the question of pursuing why things go right. Another way to get at this concept is a really useful graph that comes to us from Dr. Eric Holnagel and others. And it's this notion of work as imagined versus work as done. So the black line represents work as imagined, how we think a program is going to go in the field. And you can see the red line represents hazards, and work as imagined has us far away from those hazards, right? Going down the river, climbing the mountains, hiking, whatever the project might be, whatever the program might be, we have this linear straight line imagination of what it is. The blue line, of course, is work as done, or the program as done, the program as delivered, with all of the challenges and weather and delays and equipment that might be working improperly, or group dynamics that might be going sideways, or maybe the staff that were supposed to be working that program not being available. So we have to substitute other staff. And the blue line shows normal variations, variabilities that at sometimes exceed the black line and at other times are far below the black line in terms of their quality and their safety. So notice how at times the blue line veers close to the red line. These are when we have near misses. And if it touches the red line, of course, that's where an incident might occur. So I think this blue line, black line model, or work as imagined versus work as done, is a really useful way for us to talk about what's actually happening in our programs, and not so much through the lens of human error or who is to blame, but more like understanding the challenges and the complexities that folks encounter in the process of doing their jobs. And it can create an opportunity for us to learn from those variabilities and those near misses without waiting for the one moment where the incident occurs. We can be learning from the variability in the blue line the whole time. Hope that's a useful concept for you. So let's play with that for a few minutes. Write down an example of a time when work as done, or the program as done, deviated from work as imagined. This happens all the time. This should not be hard for you to come up with some examples of where the plan was one thing, but what you did was something else, even if it worked, even if it went well in the end. So write down an example of some sort of variability like that. And did you have any near misses? Did you have any times when you felt like you narrowly avoided some sort of undesired outcome? And did you report those near misses? Did you debrief them afterwards? Did you learn from them? Did you take anything away from them that influenced how you or your organization might approach that program or that situation in the future? So please pause the video, take a few minutes to write down your thoughts on these questions. Feel free to go back to this image here if you would like to refer to that. And when you are ready to restart the video, I will be waiting for you. Okay, welcome back. I hope that was a useful foray into exploring those questions and applying the concept of work as imagined and work as done. So what's next? I am very interested in how your organization can get better at reporting and learning from near misses in particular, because there are lottery tickets that we can cash in to our great advantage. So let's talk about personal habits, social media, and different platforms. So personal habits, some things you can do is really exploring your assumptions about incident causations. Those things that we mentioned in terms of the Swiss cheese or the dominoes. You know, if you find yourself using a very simple or mechanistic way of thinking about what causes incidents, then I think that's going to make it harder for you to report and learn from near misses. I also want to suggest daily debriefs, like what we see in this great communication checklist from AEE here. Not just debriefing when things have gone wrong, but debriefing on a regular basis to learn from what goes right. Identifying and defining what is a near miss for your organization. How is it different than normal? And how is it different than an incident? Really important to take this advice around learning instead of blaming, because that's going to not make it easier for people to report near misses if all they do is get blamed and shamed for them. And to share your stories, your vulnerabilities, even if they go way back. If there's some useful lesson that you've learned that you haven't shared with others yet, I would really encourage you to do that. Social media. Social media is not usually a good place for this kind of learning. It can lead to armchair quarterbacking and a lot of attacking and I think that is just a natural function of folks coming together who might be passionate about some topic, but there's no underlying relationship that they have with each other. So they might make it very easy for them to attack and shame and blame. And I think the more we can find ways to create platforms and spaces with community and culture and ground rules that don't allow for that, then the better off we might be at using the power of social media or the internet in general to share lessons learned without the shaming and blaming. And there are some existing platforms. If your organization has an incident reporting tool, here's some language from an organization that I worked with that really started to emphasize the importance of near miss reporting in particular. And they had a great influx in near miss reporting and learning as a result of that. I mentioned the Sharp End podcast earlier, which has done a really nice job of creating a community around sharing lessons learned without attacking and blaming and shaming each other. And there's other industry specific platforms where you can learn about and read and report near misses. And there's bunches of different ones like that. So these are just some ways to utilize existing tools that might already be out there. We don't all need to have the same mistake or experience in order to learn from it. So I'll share with you a success story, an organization that I worked with and had a campaign around near miss reporting. This is a nationwide organization with programs in all 50 states, so thousands of participants. And back in 2011, when we got started, they only had 16 near misses reported that whole year. And that was good that 16 were reported, but we knew that there was a whole lot more happening than what we were hearing about. So the next year, after making the quiz that I showed you earlier and teaching people around what is a near miss and what is normal, and positively reinforcing near misses that were coming in and using them to demonstrate the ways that we might grow and learn from them, the numbers took a big jump up to 54 near misses for that year, 54 more opportunities to learn. The next year, we made a modest jump up to 63. More training, more teaching, more using the near misses as teachable moments and near miss of the week and things like that. And then we took a big leap up to 143 near misses in 2014. And then finally, the last year of the study, we had 168. So if you look at the difference between 2011 and 2015, that's a tenfold increase in near misses that were reported. Does that mean that we were having 10 times as many near misses in the field, or were we finally hearing about the things that had actually been happening all along and taking the opportunity to try to learn from them and create improvement for others? So I'm really proud of just this simple 5-year study that we did that shows this increase in near miss reporting in a single organization, and you can do this too. A couple words of caution. Make sure that you prepare leadership for this increase in near misses so that they're not caught off guard, or so that they don't misinterpret this as some abrupt decline in safety. What it is actually an increase in safety. You're increasing your risk management capacities by hearing about what's really happening, by understanding that blue line versus the black line. And I would suggest that this is not a failure. This is a profound success, but you need to kind of prepare the leadership to see it through that lens. And of course, you have a responsibility to do something with the near misses that are reported to you. If you have 8 reports about near misses with trailer number 6, and you don't do anything about trailer number 6, and then you have some serious incident with it, then all you've done is create this paper trail of your failures to respond to the reports that you're getting. So I would suggest that you have a legal and certainly a moral responsibility to take action on the near misses that are shared with you. So in wrapping things up, If you have any questions and comments for me, here's some contact info if you've enjoyed the materials in this session. Much of it draws from my 2021 book called Beneficial Risks, that you can see a QR code there for that. And happy to take any questions, comments, or ideas that you have to better foster a culture of reporting and learning from incidents and near misses. Or if you disagree with any of the history or analysis or examples that I've used in this presentation, I'd be very interested in learning from you and seeing what you disagree with. So a couple takeaways, some action steps. Discuss the value of learning from near misses with your leadership team. Evaluate the ratio of near misses to incidents reported in your program over the past few years so you can track if your efforts are making a change there. And finally, training staff and leadership on how and why to report near misses and promote learning from these normal, routine, continuous events that we're actually having all the time. And let's not be this guy. And that is all I have for my presentation. It was fun chatting with you virtually about this, and I look forward to getting any feedback or comments people may have about this concept of really making a campaign and an intentional effort in your organization around learning from near misses. Thanks so much.